everyone. Welcome to The Heart of It, where we talk all things family life from a Christ-centered and Orthodox perspective. I'm Clara Bertan, and I'm so pleased to have with us Susan Abraham. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you.
Okay, Susan, so you are a school psychologist. You're a wife, a mom of 3, someone who's been in youth ministry for a really long time, and just someone who I really admire in the way that you parent and how intentional you are about the things that matter for us as parents. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. Okay, so today we're talking about something fun, or maybe not so fun if you have one of these kiddos, but hopefully fun by the end of our conversation.
Absolutely.
Yes, which is strong-willed children. Okay, what is a strong-willed child? How do we as parents show up in the most loving and effective way for our kiddos who maybe have a little bit of a different tendency in how they see the world? What's the gifting there, and how we can be, again, intentional about that process. So hopefully you feel really encouraged if you have one of these kiddos at home by the end of our conversation.
Yes.
But if we can just take a minute before we dive into our questions, and if you can do one fun would you rather question with us. Okay, so if you, like, none of these are good, but if you had if you had the choice, would you rather get stuck in a broken elevator or a broken ski lift? Broken elevator or a broken ski lift?
You know what? I think I would choose the ski lift because at least you can see the light of day.
Okay,
and you're not claustrophobic and you're not afraid of plummeting to your death.
Oh.
And if you
just jumping off to
if you really needed to, hopefully the snow is fluffy enough that you can just kind of throw yourself or just wait, at least you're outdoors.
Yes,
so.
Got it. And hopefully you're warm enough that you're appropriately dressed for being on a ski lift.
Exactly.
To begin with. Okay, I'm with you there. I go back and forth on this one, but seeing the sun might be.
I think that helps, especially if you're trapped there for a while.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, and hopefully, either direction, there's an emergency response on the way.
Exactly.
Okay. Very, very good. Okay. Well, hopefully you never have to make that decision in real life.
That's true, and also there's hopefully other people around so you can kind of wave them down.
Got it.
But in an elevator, they might not know that you're there.
Yeah, it really also matters who you're stuck in an elevator with.
That's very true.
Yes, yeah. You can maybe ignore the person on the ski lift a little bit. Okay, very good. All right, so let's dive into our content for today. And like we said, we are talking about strong-willed children. So maybe that's something that you're familiar with, the concept, the term, and we're going to, lay it all out for anyone who's listening today. But maybe start us off with, what is a strong-willed child? And how can I tell the difference between any child who just wants their way? That's just children in general.
So every child wants their way and they're going to push. But a strong-willed child is intensely determined to get things done in their own way. They want to do things their own way. They're resistant to being controlled by others. They are not easily swayed by promise of reward or consequences or punishment, and so they just intensely want to be able to do things the way they see that it should be done.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm hearing an intensity and something very driven about what they want and maybe even how to get there.
So many kids want their own way, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say you're at the park and then you say, all right, it's time for us to pack up. We have to go home for the day. Mm-hmm. Every kid will say, no, I don't want to. I want to stay and play more. And so the difference between, a child that's a little bit more flexible and maybe a child who's a little bit more strong-willed is one who's really going to push back. And so the child might say, oh, I really don't want to leave. And you can say, well, we have a really yummy dinner at home, or we can come back to the park tomorrow. And they'll be kind of willing to comply a little bit easier. Or if there's some kind of a reward or a consequence attached to what you're asking, they might be, willing to. A strong-willed child might just say, no, I don't want to, and run to the other side of the park. So it's a little bit more difficult to manage as a parent.
Yeah, and I'm hearing you say less room, right? Maybe there's a little bit more room, a little bit more in our toolbox for kids who are maybe less leaning towards, that strong will. And then what are the positives? What are the giftings then of a strong-willed child? Maybe we're seeing kind of that, as you're saying, it's not that it's defiance, but kind of a very intentional, this is what I want.
Right.
Okay. But then what's the upside? What's the gifting in that?
Well, the upsides come right with the characteristics that come along with it, which is they're very determined. They know what they want. They are fiercely loyal. They are determined. So whenever they set out a goal for themselves, they'll find any way to accomplish it. They are natural leaders. They're deep thinkers. So it comes along with so many strengths. And if we can learn as parents to shepherd these strengths, then we can really bring out the best in them.
Yeah, I'm hearing like remarkable adults, right?
Exactly.
In
long-term parenting. Yeah.
Right. People who are really going to be doing amazing things for the glory of God in business and in sports, in their relationships. And maybe there's something very unique then about how we have to steward that gifting. But to like right off the bat, like I love that you're making sure that we recognize like right off the bat, the gifting and the strength of that, yes, are coupled with what's usually very challenging then about raising a strong-willed child. So how do I begin then to identify? Like, not that we need a checklist, but give me some things that as a parent I can begin to identify to recognize whether or not I'm raising a strong-willed child at home.
First of all, I think if you're raising a strong-willed child because probably since they were 1 or 1.5, they've probably started to exhibit some of these characteristics. But a lot of the conversation that we'll have today is based off of the book that's written by Cynthia Tobias called You Can't Make Me, But I Can Be Persuaded. And it's all about strong-willed children. And she does talk about a checklist. She talks about how you can know if you are one, right? Or if you're raising one. And basically, they almost never accept no, or this can't happen. They will find a way to push for what they want. Sometimes they make small little things into big things. And sometimes they'll be in a really wonderful, good mood, and all of a sudden they will flip, and you'll find that their mood is shifted, and all of a sudden they're like this immovable force. Over a little tiny thing that you said, or maybe you just told them they couldn't have something, and all of a sudden their whole mood shifts. They might argue a point into the ground to the point where you're like, I've been done talking about this topic long ago, and you keep going. They're very creative. They're resourceful. They have a different way of approaching problems, and things that maybe me and you wouldn't have thought of. They will think of a different approach to it. And then really one of the keys is that they're not always just going to take what you say. They're not going to unconditionally follow the rules that you set out for them. A lot of times there's negotiation, and they need to be able to kind of have their say and make sure that they're part of that process, because they're not just going to accept a rule for what it is.
I'm hearing you share a lot of different things, right, that can give us a little bit of insight. And I know I have a strong-willed kiddo at home. That's always been very clear. As you said, like it's easy to tell from the very beginning. And one of the things that we noticed as I was hearing you share is about that mood piece that like, if your strong-willed child is doing well, then almost sets the mood for the rest of the house. If something's not, going their way, like you can really see that it affects the atmosphere.
You feel the energy in the family. That's for sure. It affects everyone.
Yes. Right. So on top of, recognizing that determined piece, the not, easily accepting no as an answer. And maybe those things that might work for a sibling or, the cousins and the nephews and the kids you've seen at church are like typical tools, right, that we've had in our way of parenting don't seem to be as effective.
Exactly.
Then,
and it's frustrating as parents, you're like trying to grab at things and then, we end up going to extreme lengths to try to get them to comply, and that's not always the goal.
Yep, and especially as you're saying, the back and forth, the arguments, the power struggle. Okay, so then if I'm a parent, right, and I'm beginning to identify these qualities or characteristics in my child and the gifting that comes alongside, that what's then important for me to know as a parent of a strong-willed child? Like, how are they wired differently that's important for me to understand?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that we all need to realize is that every kid has a choice. So sometimes we don't present a choice. Sometimes we say, clean up your room now, wear this, eat, do that. We give a lot of directives, but a child always has a choice. My high school bio teacher used to always say, the only things you have to do in life are die and pay taxes. The only things you have to do. And
I can even skirt the pay taxes piece.
Exactly. And so I think that if you are going to approach them with some kind of ultimatum or directive in terms of saying like, you must do this, they will very clearly let you know, I have a choice. I always have a choice. It's not always what you want me to choose, but if you're going to insist that I don't, I'm going to let you know that I do.
Mm.
And so it's not authority that they have an issue with. It's not the fact that you're the parent and you're in charge, because you don't want to let that go, but it's how you communicate that authority to them that I think really makes the difference.
Mm-hmm.
In your approach, are you being respectful? Are you being, cognizant of the fact that, yes, they do have a choice and you do need to acknowledge that or not?
And I think that piece becomes incrementally more important as you're sharing, the older that our children get. And it's kind of hard to figure out what does that look like for a 1-year-old. Maybe they don't have that many choices, but as they, become a toddler and there's choice of what shoes you're going to wear, or the different things that maybe for us, we take for granted. Like, yes, like as a parent, like I get to pick your outfit as a 2-year-old and you get to go out the house. There shouldn't be negotiation here. So, maybe talk me through like, then what's maybe the most misunderstood piece then of that dynamic and maybe where we can then get it wrong as parents.
It's important to understand that they don't need to control you. They don't have a desire to make all your decisions, but you just can't make all of theirs. And so there's this shared control piece of the relationship that has to happen. So I'll give you an example of how it sounds different to dictate versus to share control. So if it's a cold day and you're about to leave the house, you can say, go get a sweater, or you need to wear a sweater as we leave, right? And it sounds like a very innocent request, but maybe to a child who is a strong-willed child, they might perceive that a little bit more like you are trying to control me and what I do. So instead, you can say, hey, it's a really cold day today. What do you want to do to keep your body warm? What do you want to wear? If they're younger, you could say, hey, do you want the red sweater or the green sweater? I mean, as they get older, that might not work as well, but you can present it as a choice. And at the end of the day, your goal is not to change the goal for them. So the goal is for them to, let's say in this situation, to be warm as they go out into their day. So the goal is not to change the outcome that you expect from the child, but to give them their own way to get to that conclusion. So if you present it in that way, then they have a little bit more autonomy to say, okay, I'm going to go choose my blue jacket. And I mean, some of this might backfire a little bit. They might go to daddy's closet and say, oh, I'm going to wear this super oversized baggy, jacket that doesn't even fit me. But that's kind of the freedom and the autonomy you have to give them to be able to comply.
Yeah. And I'm almost thinking of that parent who's like, well, why should I have to do this? There's particularly, I think, even culturally, like there's this piece that's almost ingrained in us. Like as a parent, you say this thing over here, and this is just how it needs to play out. And maybe our encouragement to parents. And the thing I had to remind myself, as I began to do a little bit more research, to learn to understand, my very strong-willed child is that like, it's just not going to be effective. Right.
So that's right. If it was effective, great, use it. It's much easier to just be able to say, do this and get through your day.
Yes.
But if it's not, we have to explore these other items.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it is encouragement to say, listen, we have these tools, we have these resources, and ultimately at the end of the day, we want to guide our children to be everything that God created them to be, to just live out for God's purpose and glory. And we want to parent the child that we have, right? Not the one we thought we were going to have, not the one we imagined having. So then, talk me through then, Susan, like how this really beautiful gifting, yes, it comes with challenges, but what does that look like across the different stages, starting from toddlerhood all the way to the teen years?
So like you said earlier, when you're a toddler, you're just coming into yourself and you're just starting to realize that all your decisions have been made for you up until this point in your life. Everything that you've put in your mouth, right? We make all these decisions for our children, what they eat, what they wear, when they sleep, how they do things. And so all of a sudden they start to realize, oh, I have a choice. Mommy puts these green beans on my, my table where I eat, and I don't have to eat them. She can put them there. She can even put them in my mouth, but I don't have to swallow them. And so they start to push back, and you should expect pushback. you should expect that a child is not going to accept every decision you make for them, especially in those toddler years.
Mm-hmm.
As they move to the elementary school years, you'll see that the main question becomes why. They need to understand the why behind things. Like, there's so many things that we're expecting them to do every single day. Why do I have to do my homework? Why do I have to go to school? Why do I have to,
Be nice to my sibling.
anything, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, what's the purpose behind it? And so I think if we can back up as parents and realize, if I have this type of a child, they are going to need to understand the why behind things. Not that you have to explain every single thing you ever ask them to do, but I think as a parent, you need to understand too, kind of back up and say, okay, I'm expecting a lot. I'm expecting this, this, this. What is the point? I think if you can kind of step back and think to yourself, what is the point of what I'm asking them to do? Then you can better communicate that when they push back and they say, why? Why do I have to do that? So I'll give you just a very simple example. So let's say, homework is a thing we have to do every single day, right? Kids come home from school and it's like, it can be a constant battle. So what we've done in my home, especially with all our children, but especially with the ones that might be pushing back, is, all right, let's talk about what the point of homework is. The point is that, you go over what you learned in the day, you practice it, and it helps contribute to your grades. It's this percentage of your grade. And it needs to be done by the time you go to school tomorrow. So let's talk about how you want to approach that. Again, not dictating how a child does something, but the expectation in our home is your homework is in your backpack done by the time you leave for school at 8 a.m. So that gives the child enough wiggle room to choose how they want to do that. If they want to do it in the car line while they're waiting for you to pick them up after school and get it done, great. If they want to do it in 10-minute spurts, like when they get home and then like play a little bit and then do a little bit more, great. If they want to wait until the morning of and wake up a little early and finish the homework, that's fine too, because you've given them the freedom to be able to do that. They will now take ownership and accountability, but you can't micromanage along the way. Well, did you do it now? Did you do it now? You have to kind of give that freedom for them. And just set the expectation. The expectation is that it's done by the time you go to school.
Which what I'm hearing you then say is like getting really clear about what matters
absolutely
to us
yes.
in that process. Like, does it matter to me that the homework is done at the desk or that it's done before dinner? Or because there might be, some households with different considerations of like, different activities or things that you might need to take into account. But then there's a clarity for us as parents as to what we're communicating as what the actual reason behind what the request
exactly
is. And maybe then talk me through, like, does that look a little different than in adolescence? Is there even more space for that because of the autonomy and then kind of the responsibility that comes with that?
As they become teens, they, if we're continuing to micromanage every part of their life, it communicates a lack of trust for them on their part. They think, my parents don't trust me to do X, Y, or Z. And so it becomes more of like your role becomes more of a guide as opposed to like dictating what they're going to do, but guiding them to help them reach their goals. Oh, you have a goal of finishing this assignment or getting this grade in class or whatever it is that they want to accomplish in their life. You're guiding them to do that. And the way that it's done is really having that conversation and making sure that it's a conversation. So you might have certain goals for your child. You might have goals for them to get straight A's or to be involved in all these different activities. But you have to have that conversation to say like, hey, tell me what you want to get out of this class. Tell me what you want to accomplish. That way I can help you get there, And so one of the things that's really effective with strong-willed children is instead of giving them all of these like demands and all of these, things that they need to do all the time, it's like tasks, like individual tasks, like we need to do this, we need to do that. It's more like giving them compelling problems to solve. And then you'll see where their creativity comes out and where their initiative comes out and them wanting to solve it. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you ask your child every week, like, hey, it's Monday night. The trash needs to go out by Tuesday. Can you please take out the trash? Yeah, Mom, no problem. I'm just going to finish this. I'm just doing this. And then you find yourself like nagging a little bit. It's like, hey, child, let's talk about this issue that we have, this grand problem, which is the trash, the trash man comes on Tuesday mornings, We always have an issue about like gathering the trash, taking it all the way out to the street. How do you think we can solve this problem of making sure that the trash is out on the street so it doesn't stink up the house and so that, we don't have to nag each other to do it? How do you think this should be solved? And then you'll see their gears will start to turn. They'll talk to their siblings. They'll try to figure out this whole system. And before you know it, you'll see like, okay, well, I've created a chart and on Mondays I'm going to do it. But every other week, my sibling is going to do it, but I'm going to put an alarm on my phone, whatever it is. But they had this like problem that they needed to solve, and they were part of coming up with a solution.
Yeah. I love that so much. And as you were sharing that story, it came to mind because again, like we're both sharing that we have strong-willed children at home. We had ordered a variety box of goldfish, my one strong-willed child and his sibling, his brother, are trying to figure out how they're going to split up the most coveted flavors within this box. And he actually put out, he made a chart and, he put his brother's name, he put his name, and they're tally marking the different goldfish that they're splitting up.
I love that.
Yeah, and it's so funny because, again, the point was, guys, figure out the box is yours. Make a plan, come up with a system. I thought it was an overly complicated system for, what it needed to be. But this idea of compelling problems to solve, yes, it requires a little bit more thoughtfulness, more intentionality for us as parents. But then you get to see the real beauty that comes with this giftedness of being strong-willed, being spirited, being an innovative thinker. And doesn't that bring us so much joy as parents, seeing this one thing that could be very hard turn into something very
But don't we rob them of that so often? Don't we jump in before trying to solve their problems way too often? And then it takes that opportunity from them to be able to problem solve together, to be able to come up with solutions. And then, especially if we're jumping in and saying, this is how it's going to be, you're going to have the gold ones on, and you're going to have the colorful ones. Then it's like, they're like, forget it. I don't want any goldfish.
Really unfortunate if that's not something, again, I'm hearing you saying being really intentional about this. So how can we then be more intentional about that cooperative approach, right? That doesn't elicit so much of that pushback, if we're being more thoughtful about that.
I'll give you an example. I think the thing that I want to say is that we need to ask more questions. We need to issue fewer orders and just be more curious and ask questions. So when one of my sons was 8 years old, he came to me and he said, Mommy, I'm an atheist. And I was like, oh, really? Tell me that again? Okay.
Which would make a lot of parents' hearts drop. Right.
Yeah. So in that moment, you have a choice. There's different ways you can approach it, right? Number one, which is just, what do you mean you're an atheist? We are a Christian home. We believe in Jesus. And this is this is what we believe. And I don't understand it. Where did you even learn that word from, But really, truly, is that going to change the heart of the child? Is that going to elicit relationship and really be able to have that conversation back and forth? It's not. It just shuts down the conversation. And so when he said, I'm an atheist, I said, oh, really? Okay. So now our goal is to ask more questions. Tell me, what does that word mean to you? What makes you think that you're an atheist? What about Christianity makes you feel a little uncomfortable? And, he started opening up, and it's not a one conversation kind of an issue, so you're not going to get through it. But I think that's important to know too as a parent, is that you don't have to solve every issue by the end of every conversation. Some conversations and some issues are going to take up to years to really work through. But the goal is not to convince the child at this point, and with this example, to become a Christian and to believe. And that's not really the goal. The goal is to ask questions, to learn what's in their mind, what's on their heart, how do they think about things, so that you can, eventually get to the point where you understand where they're coming from and what you can do about it,
And I love that you're sharing that, because it really is a model of God's care towards us. Our God is a God who wants us to freely choose Him. Our God doesn't, control, manipulate.
Yes.
he doesn't, trick us into a relationship with Him. He is just good and present in our lives in a way that draws us into that goodness. And I think we can model so much about, who God is first and foremost in our lives, and who we hope for Him to be in our children's lives when our posture is that of listening, of attentiveness, of care, of real curiosity, as you're sharing. And so, if I'm that parent and I'm hearing that question, like the topic that hopefully should elicit some questions, is there a good way for us to be asking questions? Like some questions can come off not as questions. What's
Some
the right
questions
way?
are triggers for
Yes,
sure.
yeah.
And there's a little formula. If you use the word why and you use the word you in the same sentence, those are probably triggering questions. So why did you do that?
Yeah.
Or
What's the matter with you is not a question. It's not a curious
That's another
question.
variation of it,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
How could you think that was a good idea?
Yeah.
Those are not questions that are going to elicit relationship with your
that's
child.
frustration that we're
That's
venting.
frustration.
Yes.
You want to ask open-ended questions that really build relationship. Tell me more about that. Oh, is that what your friends think? Even if this is a funny one, but even if it's like they're doing something and it's really upsetting or annoying, hey, are you doing that to annoy me on purpose? Even infused with a little bit of humor, that can be very disarming. And it's like, what? No, I'm not. Oh, okay. It was a little annoying. I was just wondering, but there's another little technique too. In order to turn something into a question, and in order to get a little bit more compliance, asking, like saying what you want, but then adding the little word of okay with a question mark at the end of it. And I'll tell you what that does. So let's say you're in the car and you say, all right, put on your seatbelt. We got to go. And they're like, I don't want to, or they just keep,
They're involved
messing
in
around.
something else. Like
they're involved in something else and you just can't get them to do it. A lot of times it's just like, as a parent, we just need them to comply. But if you add that little word, okay, at the end, it's like, hey, buckle your seatbelt, okay? It kind of gives a little bit of wiggle room for them because they don't always, children that are strong-willed will not always just take what you say. They have to negotiate just a little bit. So when you ask that okay, they can negotiate a little bit. Yeah, but it's a little bit too tight. Oh, okay. And then you can kind of loosen it a little bit. Oh, is that better? Yeah. And you'll find you'll get a lot more compliance because they feel like they have a little bit more say in what you're asking.
And again, I think I'm imagining that parent who's maybe asking themselves, like, why do I have to jump through all of these hoops? And it's just an encouragement, again, to remind ourselves that the intention isn't to make this overly complicated or that we, want to water down our authority as parents. Like, we want to steward that unique gifting in our child so that there's going to be a day when we can't ask then something of them that maybe it is a little more direct and there's been enough practice, there's been enough heart in the relationship that there isn't defiance, at every corner, right? So that we're working we're building that muscle up just a little bit so that we're allowing ourselves to be more effective in these other areas so that, if you are rushed one day and it doesn't come across in that way,
Right.
Your child is seeing that as the exception and not as the way that they're constantly being dealt with. So, it's kind of giving ourselves a little bit more breathing room, a little bit more permission.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly it.
As parents. And, as you're kind of sharing these effective strategies, like I also think of like what it means for us to maybe like ask maybe too many times in different ways. Like what we're asking is like maybe too many warnings, too many, veiled type of requests. Like give me a sense of like what a direct approach would be. Because I think sometimes we ask for too much, and we give too many warnings, especially with strong-willed children.
We overwarn, we over-remind our kids. And I heard it said once, if you're reminding your kid all the time, you're just training them to be a forgetter. Whether how true that is or not, warnings are less effective. And the author of this book that we're basing the conversation on was a police officer once, and she said during her police academy training, they taught her if you're going to pull someone over because they were speeding, either give them a warning and kind of like a little lecture, or give them a ticket, but don't do both. You can't pull them over, give them a lecture, and then also issue a ticket. And it's the same thing with our kids. I think especially with strong-willed kids, they want you to be the authority. They want you to mean what you say. So if you issue some kind of warning, make sure you just follow through. And if they don't comply, then just issue the ticket instead of this long, drawn-out kind of, scenario where you're explaining and so for example, let's say they are playing with a toy and they keep throwing it. And you say, listen, the toys need to be played with like this. If you throw it, I'm going to take it away. They throw it again, take it away. Just without any kind of big lecture that comes along with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think this is the part where we're empowered then as parents, because there's this whole other area where we're being a little bit more flexible in how we're asking the question. And we want to be balanced then in our approach, because there is something potentially very damaging about losing our authority as parents. It's not two peers. Yes, there's areas where we're collaborative, but I am still your parent. I do still have a role in this relationship that is not yours, So that piece of like where then we are drawing the lines and the boundaries, I think is really important as you're sharing.
And it's important to have that balance, firm but kind. Firm meaning you're going to do whatever you say you're going to do. Yeah. Meaning if you say, we have this friend who all of us, we try to choose like the worst possible consequence to be able to get our kids to comply. So one time he told his daughters, he was trying to get them to clean up. If you don't clean up this room, Christmas is canceled, And it's like, oh, am I really going to do that? Am I going to cancel Christmas? And what does that mean? No, we're not going to do that. So let's not go that far. Yep. But you do need to hold a line, be firm, but you be kind about it. Mm-hmm. You're on the kid's side. You're rooting for them. But here's the standard. This is the standard that we can't cross. This is like the goal. And I'm going to help you get there. But I have to hold you to that standard. And they respect you more for it.
Yep. Which is fair. It's balanced and fair, and not as in like, like 50-50%, but it's like really what our children need in that moment. And the warmth piece, as you're saying, is so key, is so critical. And I'm curious then, with this kind of temperament, Susan, like how do we then help our strong-willed child to experience God, in a real and genuine way? Are there special considerations for strong-willed children as we're helping them steward their relationship with God?
It's important how they view God. So if God is this ultimate like rule giver and this like dictatorial authority in the sky that issues edicts like you can do this, you can't do that, that doesn't really jive with their personalities. They don't view rules the same way that us parents view rules. They are more like guidelines. And so if there's this being that's going to just be, just issuing rules, they're like, I don't really want anything to do with that. And they'll run far from it. But if you help them steward more of a relationship with God, this is a loving Father. He gives you that freedom. Actually, he's the one that's the author of free will. And you help them kind of understand more about his character. That's going to be way more effective than, no, God said we can't do this. God said we can do this. We have to do this. That's just not going to work in their spiritual development.
So that piece of who God is, right, being at the forefront. And I'm thinking, particularly with my strong-willed child at home, and picking up on those like kind of innate pieces that come naturally to the kind of their spiritual genetic makeup. And he's very justice oriented, right? Like for him, like fairness is such a big thing. And like, someone cutting a line or someone doing something out of turn, like it's like something very important to him. So giving him the other side of who God is, of like, yes, God is for justice, absolutely, but he's also a God for grace. He's a God who meets us in our brokenness. It's helping them, again, also like widen that view of who God is. And there's times for compassion and there's times for those limits and those boundaries, obviously, certainly with compassion and warmth and tenderness, but you're almost picking up of like where the holes are in that, because yes, there's the strong will, but then there's just the natural part of being, a child with their own personality, their own quirks, and being very intentional about that.
Yeah, and we should expect them to question. We should expect them to push back. It's a big concept, and it's not our job to force it down their throats. It's our job to model it and to show all of these wonderful characteristics that God has, right? So that they can see it in action. So, for example, if a kid comes to you and says, I don't want to go to church anymore. A lot of times like, what do you mean? Yes, we're going to go to church and this is when we do. And, you can respond that way. And you can also step back. And just like we were talking about before with asking open-ended questions, it's the same thing with God and with spirituality and asking, what makes you not want to go to church? Tell me about that. oh, well, it's boring, and I just get really frustrated. It's very long and they sing everything. And you're like, oh, yeah, sometimes I can kind of doze off as well. Or, sometimes I get bored as well. What would you do to, make it a little bit more engaging? Oh, well, I don't know. I haven't thought about it. Okay, well, let's go to church today. I want you to take some notes about things that you might like, things that you might, want to do differently. And not that this necessarily means that church itself is going to change, but at least they see your attitude is open, that you're willing to hear what's on their mind, what's on their heart. You're not just, forcing something, and that you've heard their thoughts,
Yeah, and so, we've talked a little bit about the intensity that comes with strong-willed children. And, there's days where it's inevitable, right, where the meltdown feel a little bit bigger, a little bit more jolting, I think, with a strong-willed child. So, how do we bring out the best in our kids? Like, I know it's really hard in the moment, right? But how do we do our best as we are thinking through the strong-willed child when they're not doing well?
I think especially in the middle of a blowout, you need to just stop and back off. Because a lot of times we get drawn into these battles back and forth, and then before you know it, because they know how to push our buttons and they know how to draw us into these
It's a special gifting as a strong-willed child to know your buttons. Yes.
So they know how to draw us in, and so we need to just back off. We need to stop yelling, stop pursuing, and just leave the room and just kind of give ourselves some time to de-escalate a little bit. And then we need to think about it as a parent. What's the point? What is the point of what I'm trying to say? Let's say you have a teenage daughter and she's just, she comes in and she's like, all my friends can stay out later than I can. And, this, like, what are you talking about? We're just trying to keep you safe. And it just like, there's this blowout situation. In addition to backing up, you need to think to yourself, okay, well, let's talk about what the point is. And you know how in adolescence we talked about having those conversations so that there can be more accountability and buy-in from their part. So let's say you want to set a curfew, right? Let's say you've set a curfew, I don't know, for your older teenage daughter of 8 p.m. or something. And this is what's causing this current meltdown situation. Later, you can sit down and say, hey, let's talk about what the point is. The point of a curfew is that, number one, we want to make sure you're safe. Number two, we want to make sure that you're engaged in activities that are going to be healthy and helpful for you and that you're not getting into any kind of trouble. We want to be awake to be able to, be of support if you need us. So, daughter, what do you think? What do you think would be a reasonable curfew? Oh, well, 11 p.m. You'll get these like answers, and then you could just use humor at that point. Oh, well, nice try. Yeah, 11 p.m. That's not going to work. You're still living under a house. Like, tell us reasonably. What do you think? Okay, Dad. Well, I don't know, but like maybe 10 p.m. If you don't feel comfortable with that, well, let's try making it a little bit later. Let's try making it at 9, just so that we can try this out and you can go from there. But basically, you need to be able to communicate what the importance behind this rule is, and be able to hear back from her why. Well, actually, the volleyball game that we're going to attend doesn't finish until 9 p.m. Oh, okay. And then there's a little bit of negotiation. All right, it doesn't finish till 9 p.m. All right, what about if let's make it 9:30 and you can do whatever you want beforehand, but when you're done with the game, just call me and let me know you're on your way home. Whatever it is, but there's some point of negotiation while still communicating that this is important.
And if there's other areas where they're winning, so to speak, where because we're not picking up every battle, right? We're giving them a lot of room in the areas where we're not saying this is morality, this is character. Then there's a bit more of that collaborative spirit, I think, in these other areas. And then the repair attempts, if, it's gone off the rails or we were not as intentional about that space as parents. And so maybe as we come then to a close, Susan, like, I'm just curious that parent maybe who's realizing, okay, I have a strong-willed child at home, and maybe we've entered into these power dynamics. We've gotten into these struggles where it's the tit for tat back and forth. How do I begin to reorient myself a little differently as a parent for a more grace-filled approach, and to start approaching my strong-willed child a little differently?
I think if you value that they have a unique perspective to the world, valuing that and respecting them as an individual, even for the toddler, even for the toddler, showing them, giving them some choices, shows them that you respect them, you respect that they have a choice, and that you really are rooting for them to make a good choice. The other thing is, strong-willed children is like many children, they want a relationship with their parents. And to the extent that the relationship is strong and good, they will do whatever it takes to keep that. That's important for them. So it's not like they just want to rebel and go against authority. Actually, if they have a strong relationship with you, if you've invested into that child in terms of asking about their interests, sitting next to them and seeing what they're into, spending quality time with them, whatever it is that you feel like gives you that closeness with them, they will want to preserve that at any cost. And so, even as we fumble with all these different techniques and strategies and, I really blew it today, going to them and just saying, I really blew it today. I completely exploded. I shouldn't have done that. And you apologize. And you just approach them with an open, honest heart. And I really love you. And I love this unique gifting in you. I love to see that you think about this in a different way, even though I might not agree. I love that about you. If they feel like they are valued, they're respected, they're loved, they will do whatever it takes to preserve that relationship.
So I'm hearing relationship first, go back to, in some ways the basics, right, of what makes any parenting relationship effective. Yes, there's this consideration of that strong-willed nature, but it's not everything, right? Like it's a special consideration for us to be mindful of, but at the core, coming back to the value, the love, the respect, the warmth that you're speaking to, I think is so key and so critical, and to not feel discouraged along the way, because these are amazing kiddos, and if you have one at home, that we're all praying.
You're lucky.
Yes, we are, really, because it's remarkable. Now, that my child's a little older, I'm seeing where that gifting is blossoming and creating some really interesting interests and things that I know God is going to take and steward. If I don't get in the way, God willing. And so thank you so much, Susan, for a really edifying conversation. And we pray that, if you do have a strong-willed kiddo, maybe more than one at home, you feel encouraged by our conversation today. And as always, we continue to pray for you. And thank you again, Susan. And so hopefully you come and join us again next time as we tackle another parenting topic that's hopefully going to bless your home. Thank you.
Thank you.